LeaderCast.
Hi, and welcome to Deep Leadership. I'm your host, John Rennie. Well, I hope all is well with you today. This is another special Wednesday morning episode brought to you by our sponsor, Jeremy Clevenger Fitness, who we featured on episode 145. Now, if you've listened to the show for a while, you know that Jeremy helped me get in the best shape of my life in 2022. And if you're working on your health and fitness goals in 2023, I encourage you to put Jeremy in your corner to help you as well. There are links in the show notes to find all of his services. I have another great show lined up for you today, but before we get started, I just want to remind you to check out the leadership books I've written on either Amazon or my website, johnsrennie.com. This year, I'm offering a new way to purchase all my books for a discount. I bundled the books into what I call the Qualified Watchstander series, and you get all 3 books for 15% off the individual prices. This offer is only available on my website, so check it out if you're looking to step up your leadership game this year. Also, as a reminder, Deep Leadership is ranked in the top 2% most popular shows out of 3 million podcasts globally and is now ranked in the top 100 management podcasts in the U.S. thanks to your support. I want to thank each and every one of you for listening in each week and sharing these episodes with your friends. You have helped this podcast grow into a top-performing show, so thank you very much. Well, that is it. Today, we're going to be talking about Navy leadership. My guest is the host of the popular Don't Give Up the Ship podcast. He's a retired Master Chief with 21 years in the submarine service. Many of you know I cut my teeth in leadership in the submarine service, and I was honored to sit down and talk about leadership issues in the submarine force, in the Navy, in the military in general, with a guy that cares deeply about leadership issues in the military. Now, this was such a great conversation. I had to break it into 2 episodes, so strap in to the first part of this powerful conversation. Are you ready to dive in? Let's get started.
Welcome to Deep Leadership. Leadership is a people business. That's the philosophy of your podcast host, John Rennie. As a former Cold War submarine officer who spent 20 plus years leading businesses in corporate America before starting his own manufacturing business, he knows that leadership matters. Are you ready for some real-world actionable advice from John as well as his expert guests?
I'm ready.
The show starts right now.
Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today, I'm joined by the host of the Don't Give Up the Ship podcast. He is a retired Master Chief Petty Officer with 21 years in the submarine service. He is now focused on the professional and leadership development of enlisted sailors and military members through his podcast and online resources. Now, this is one of my go-to podcasts on leadership, and I am honored to have him join me on this show to talk about all things leadership. So welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm honored to have a Master Chief on the show, our first Master Chief from the Navy, and a former submariner too. So absolutely, it's great to have you.
Absolutely, I'm pumped.
So let's tell us a little bit about your background, what you did, and then tell us when you got this passion for professional and leadership development.
For sure. Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned it, 21 years, feels like 5 minutes and feels like 100 years at the same time. But so I joined the Navy in 2000. It was 2002, but it was the September 11th attacks. We were talking a little bit before recording. I was a college student. September 11th happened. I was already looking at it, but it pushed me over the edge. And I joined the Navy because my dad and brother are both Navy vets. Brother was in at the time. So it was just like, a confluence of all kinds of circumstances led me to that. Spent 21 years in submarine service, 3 submarines, 3 shore duties, called it a day after a misadventure with cancer and anxiety and insomnia. That's a whole nother rabbit hole we don't need to go down. But also I saw an opportunity to make the impact that I wanted to on active duty. I've had a whole bunch of listeners and supporters say, man, you should be a fleet master chief. You should be a force master chief. You should be the MCPON. And in my mind, I'm like, it doesn't matter if I was in those positions. I don't think I could affect the change that I can through the podcast. And the origin story there is I was a chief at about 15 years when I was an instructor at the CSA school. And then I became the SEL there at the end. But we kind of recognized a need. It wasn't just me. It was all the instructors. I started to hear all these stories about all these students reaching back, asking for leadership help. It wasn't like, how do I be a better CS? It was, how do I deal with this tyrannical LPO, or I found myself based on like unplanned losses and unforeseen complications in a leadership position very rapidly. What do I do with my hands? And so a lot of instructors were like answering Facebook messages, answering emails constantly about the same types of things. And so was I. And so I was looking for a mechanism where I could just direct them. Hey, go to this resource. And it didn't really exist at the time. And this was right around, I started about 2016. So this is right as podcasts were starting to get popular. And I was looking for something that I could do without my face and name on it, because I was still on active duty. And I thought it would be awkward if I got a following and then I was being like recognized at the exchange or something. And I also had a big concern about like having the credibility to get through to junior sailors, because that was my target audience at the beginning, was just like E5 and below, pretty much. And I knew him well enough to know that some chief with his face and name all on a podcast, like trying to sell themselves like a used car salesman, immediately, like you're not even going to get past the link. Like you're just not going to listen. So I was like, this can't be about anything other than helping these people. Like I needed to set it up in a way where you couldn't find a win for me. It wasn't an eval bullet. It wasn't a ego stroke. I wasn't making money off of it. Nothing. And so that's why everybody gives me a hard time about it. I go by DGuts. I don't put my name on it even to this day, because it's not about me. That's not why I'm doing it. And I wanted to build that credibility with junior sailors over time. And we settled on a podcast because it was, I got to reach these kids where they are, and I got to do it in that way. So I wanted to reach them through their phones, like that appendage, like that's built into their hands now. We're all cyborgs, but I can get them there. And they can listen to it while they're running. They can, like all the, during a commute, whatever. But also I didn't want my face or name on it. So like YouTube's out, it like automatically, I can't do like Instagram things or whatever. That's gotta be, and I knew it would need to be long form as well. Like I would need time to work through a lot of these topics. So I recorded the intro episode, sent it to a bunch of people I trusted, like a kind of like a cross section, like junior sailors, former students, chiefs, officers, and said, hey, is this a good idea or am I an idiot? And I just let the feedback come, and everybody universally was like, this is a good idea.
It's a really good idea. I remember finding it and I was like, holy cow, this is, because at the time you were still active duty and you're basically helping, so some junior sailors, more senior sailors that are transitioning into leadership roles. And it was just really solid leadership advice, and not only just helping the sailors and helping other military members, but just even myself as a leader, I was learning things from you in terms of leadership that I hadn't thought of. So it was really a powerful thing. And you've been doing it for 7 years. Is that right?
7 years. Yeah. I'm in year 7. And it's evolved a lot. Like, so I mentioned I was targeting junior people. What I found as just a byproduct of my going through this process of identifying what I believe to be the issues and sailor feedback or like listener feedback, because they're not all sailors nowadays. I got everybody, but they were asking me questions, and then I would analyze those things, talk about them. And what I found was I started to gain a pretty large following of chiefs, officers, and like the board eligible senior-ish first classes, the ones that were starting to really consider, I'm an LPO, I'm probably gonna be a chief. And they were starting to like question their readiness or like first classes that don't have a chief. What do I do? How do I fill this gap and interact with the mess and all that stuff? So I very quickly figured out that just like the issues that I'm talking about, like every sailor will tell you their biggest issue that they have on a daily basis is the byproducts of incompetent leadership. They're not going to articulate it exactly like that, but that's what they're going to be trying to convey. And so I started talking a lot about chief stuff because, again, like if I could fix anything in the Navy, it'd be the chief's mess. And we won't go down that rabbit hole. You can go listen to my podcast if you really want to find out, but it's kind of like it's every E6 and below's biggest problem. It's probably every E7 and above's biggest problem. And so by virtue of talking about that, it evolved into this audience of I got stacks of emails from chiefs saying like, you reinvigorated me and taught me all these things and showed me ways of doing things I never entertained. And like, I literally have messages saying you changed my life, which blows my mind every time it happens. But it's like, I wasn't anticipating even having that audience. I had a lot of concern about like, and it's like imposter syndrome stuff, but like concerns that the Chiefs mess, like I would get a backlash because I criticize it a lot. I admit we're doing a lot of things wrong, and I include myself in that, right? I'm far from perfect, but what I found was it was almost like there's this silent majority within the Chiefs mess that all kind of feel the same way, but when they look around the room in the mess, they're like assuming no one else does and that they're on an island. But to hear me say it, they're just like, oh, somebody else thinks the way I do. And it turns out a lot of people do. Like I've never interacted with a chief petty officer, active or retired, that vehemently disagrees with what I'm saying. And I'm just the one that's willing to say it. It seems. And so, yeah, it's evolved quite a bit. It's super fun. I've learned so much. I'm a better communicator. I'm a better speaker. I have connected with incredible people, including yourself. Like I was just on the phone with retired Fleet Master Chief Paul Kingsbury, who does the Cutlass podcast. Like, yeah, and he's been on mine a bunch of times. Like and I just had an hour-long conversation with him about leadership stuff. And then we're going to do a podcast. And he sent me an article he wants to talk about. And so it's incredible. Like I just like casually some retired fleets texting me. To me, that's still weird. Like I'm just I'm hoping to get a retired MCPON on soon. Like just all this stuff and it's not just because he's a retired MCPON. It's because he has a really interesting story to tell. But yeah, I've kind of let it evolve freely into this wild thing. It's like we were joking earlier about the 3-hour, 4-hour podcast that I do sometimes. And it's like, I've found that I arrive in these unexpectedly amazing places with guests when I just kind of say it's going to go where it goes for as long as it goes. I can edit it so I can shorten it if I need to, or if we like talk about something and somebody gets too vulnerable or just overshares, I can edit. But I have found myself in places with guests where we're talking about things and they're sharing things that I would have never imagined was going to come up on the podcast, but it's like incredible content that resonates with the listener and teaches me things. So and that's kind of the theme of like the development of the podcast too. It's just kind of like, that's turning into a whole different thing now that I'm retired, even where I now have 2 people on the hook to potentially do podcasts that I'm going to publish. But I'm basically going to, I really, really would love to turn my podcast platform into like a Proceedings Magazine podcast form, like where people are just contributing sporadically, regularly, whatever. And so I'm publishing multiple podcasts per week under the umbrella, but it's like, I want different perspectives than just my own. Even when I'm talking to a guy like you, like, I don't want it to, like, I'm going to flavor this conversation with my perspective and opinion and whatever. And I want to hear from other people and other perspectives, even if they're like wildly opposed to what I'm talking about or just a contrary opinion. Like, bring it, come on with it. I want to hear from everybody. I want to talk to everybody. But I also want, like, I got a couple of junior sailors. I think it might be a one-off. I don't know. They're going to do a podcast on, I think it's the misadventures of this previous MCPON when he went to the aircraft carrier and gave notorious all hands call. But it's 2 E6s that are going to talk about it, and I'm not even going to be on it. Like I'll bookend it with an intro outro, but I don't want to flavor that conversation at all. I want to hear their perspective on it. How did they experience that? How did they interpret everything he said?
I mean, my son's an E5 and his best friend's an E5, and they I'm just listening to them. They were both home for Christmas, and just hearing them talk about that, the E5 perspective on that, is interesting.
And it's one of those things where it's like, I think I know generally how it was interpreted. I mean, if nothing else, from just filtering through like Reddit and the memes that just like flooded the Navy internet, like on social media and everything. But I don't really know. And it's like, and from person to person, I'm sure there's like nuanced differences. And it's like, I want to hear about that. And I think my listeners do too. So that's the goal. Is I got a handful of people that I'm talking to about doing it. And so that's, I would have never imagined that's where it was going to go.
Yeah,
I never imagined I'd end up on YouTube and all this
you buy a microphone. Next thing you know, you've done all these things.
You never. Yeah.
I heard you talking on a podcast where like the PXO school wanted were recommending to listen to your podcast, and PXO school these are officers who are about to become the executive officer either on a ship or a submarine. And they've been recommended to listen to your podcast. So how does that feel?
I was shook. It was my first really, meaningful, concrete indicator that the idea I had of retiring and doing this, which it's not the only reason I retired. There's a lot of other reasons, but I was really excited at the idea of being able to devote more time and bandwidth and effort to the podcast, and it freed me up to do YouTube and expand in all these ways that I wasn't before. But it was the first really meaningful sign I had that institutional change was possible in this way, because if they're recommending me at the XO school, like at the PXO pipeline, not only am I accessing, but they care enough and believe enough in what I'm doing to think it's important enough to recommend it to what is effectively two of the three triad members, right? Because those XOs become COs. So it's like, I'm not just accessing XOs, like I'm accessing XOs that are going to become COs. And that's like, I still like have a hard time wrapping my mind around it. And granted, like they're not all going to access it. It's not like it's part of the curriculum. It's just on a list of recommendations. But it was a sign to me that I kind of knew they were listening already. Just analytics and like people have recommended it, and hey, I texted this to all the active fleet master chiefs. I'm like, thanks. I don't know how I feel about that. This is when I'm still on active duty. But it's like, I kind of knew they were listening based on the analytics of who's listening. But I had never seen like an overt sign of like, not only are they listening, but it's like, it's resonating. And when I had a listener, cause I didn't even see it myself, a listener reached out to me and said, hey, they're recommending your podcast at PXO school. I'm like, what? Cause I didn't, it's not like I pushed it. I didn't sell myself to anybody. It just happened. And that was really, really encouraging to me. And there's a few other instances like that where the institution, or a subset of the leadership in the institution that is the Navy was actively recommending, like, you need to go listen to this dude. And I was just like, okay, like maybe I can make this work the way that I thought. So.
That's wild. Let's just talk about that a little bit. Obviously you have a passion for leadership. You have a passion for seeing better leadership in the Navy. What are some of the challenges you see in Navy leadership today? And not, you don't have to, throw them under the bus, but some things that, we've seen a lot of problems. I read a lot of news stories. Suicides are up. People are frustrated. There was a lot of conflict over the COVID shots, and a lot of good people left over that. What are some of the leadership challenges that you see happening in the Navy these days?
Because I'm limited in time, the one I'm going to focus on was I talked to a first class a few days ago. She's trying to start a podcast. That's one of the people I'm talking to about, like, that podcast would be one of the ones that would be under my publishing umbrella if that's how she decides to go with it. But she asked me, we ended up on the topic, and she asked me a question that it's, to me, and it sounds harsh when I say it, and I say it regularly nowadays, and it's highly influenced by a book called The Peter Principle. It's about hierarchies and how they work. I highly recommend it to everyone. But it's leadership incompetence is the problem, and it's a broad umbrella to put a bunch of stuff under. But what I find is the Navy likes to deal with the symptom of problems with nav admins and programs and remedial training and stuff like that. And it's almost always reactive. But in addition to being reactive, it's always treating what is only the symptom of a problem. And an example is acute mental health issues in the military. They're looking at it in a vacuum. Like, we have these mental health issues. We need to do mental health things to fix mental health issues.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, but why? Why is why is the rate of suicide skyrocketing? Why is the acute mental health issues skyrocketing? Why, in the words of Mick Pondsmith during that notorious all hands call, can we not get enough mental health resources to keep pace with demand no matter what we do? Why is that the case? Because it wasn't the case before. We've always had mental health issues in the military, but we have like really bad acute mental health issues all over the place that are affecting unit efficacy and the ability to deploy. And I mean, look at the SRBs they're offering sailors to come into the Navy. Like, you just got to be breathing and we'll give you 6 figures. Like, please join the military. So, but I feel, and I can't concretely say this because I've never been in DC in those rooms, but based on the behavior of the organization, they don't recognize that to me, again, like, and I think like any sailor or military member or probably a veteran that you ask, the reason why you have the level of stress that leads to acute mental health issues is poor leadership. And the leadership interactions that affect the lives of these sailors so badly that we end up with acute mental health issues. It's just incompetence, because consider we're both submariners, right? You're not going to stand a watch unless you're trained and qualified to do so. So right. How dare us as an organization allow people into leadership positions without being trained and qualified to do what we're asking of them? And it's wildly more impactful and just like meaningful to the organization and the mission we're trying to accomplish that they're ready to do that, right? Like, I stood diving officer of the watch for 3 years. It's infinitely more important that I'm as qualified and prepared and knowledgeable as I was about ships control, that with leadership. Like, I have like 6-7 people in my division. I have about 12 to 15 in my department, depending on the size of the submarine. It's like, those people are the end user of my leadership. If I'm incompetent at doing that, not just because you talk about it and people think about like our interactions like on a day-to-day basis, just talking, or how I treat you or how I make you feel. Those are all really important, but also I can wreck your entire outlook and level of motivation, commitment to the mission and the organization and everything else without ever seeing you in real life. I can do it with a pen. I can do it inside of INCEPs when I deny your leave or recommend that it not be approved or just sit on it for forever, right? Like, there's all kinds of things I could do where I just destroy your sense of belonging to this organization without ever even seeing you. And that probably happens quite a bit on larger platforms like an aircraft carrier or base or whatever. So to me, it's rampant leadership incompetence. And it's not the fault. And this is an important point, because it does sound so harsh. It sounds like I'm attacking everybody wearing khakis in the military, and I'm not, because I used to be that guy. It's not their fault. They don't know how to do it. It's the organization's responsibility to teach them how to do it. And I often align this or parallel it with culinary specialists. Everybody complains about food constantly, right? I got a fancy culinary degree, real industry experience. If you let me go teach, that's going to be the best food you've ever had on a ship, because I have that capacity, that level of knowledge, the training and the experience to do that. However, if you keep me tied up in ships control, which is what happened on my last submarine, the food's not going to be that good. I don't have any fleet returnees. I have a division of junior guys that never see me.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Leadership skills are like any other skills. You need to practice them to get better at them. Best-selling leadership author John S. Rennie knows this. That's why he's written a new book called You Have the Watch. It's a guided journal for leaders designed to take you through an entire year of leadership training. By the end of the year, you will master 50 of the most important leadership skills. If you want to have a greater impact on the results and people in your organization, go to youhavethewatch.com and pick up your copy today.
This podcast is brought to you by Jeremy Clevenger Fitness. As a high-performing leader, you know that leadership isn't about telling people what to do, it's about leading by example. And for most people, the one area they are lacking when it comes to leading by example is their health and fitness. By improving your health and fitness, every other area of your life improves. But how do you get and stay fit as a busy leader? Well, you do what you've always done. You hire the best person for the job. Now, don't struggle on your own. Put Jeremy Clevenger on your team. Jeremy will work with you to help take your physique, mindset, nutritional habits, and more to the next level with his step-by-step, all-inclusive coaching program. Now, I've worked with Jeremy for the past year, and I'm in the best shape of my life. So if you want to step up your game, reach out to Jeremy at jeremyclevengerfitness.com to find out more and get your initial consultation scheduled with him today. This episode is brought to you by the Fraternity of Excellence. The Fraternity of Excellence is an online and real-world community for men who are looking to improve in all areas of their lives. The men of FOE are working together to become better husbands, fathers, and leaders at work and in their communities. They live by a simple philosophy: as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. Now, I've been a member for more than 3 years, and for me, I finally found a brotherhood of men that I was missing from my time in the military. Now, I love being around guys who are dedicated to becoming a better version of themselves. So if you're interested in becoming a man of excellence as well, go to fraternityofexcellence.com, or you can reach out directly to me to learn more.
I was standing 8 hours of dive every day, plus post-watch, pre-watch, brief, and all this shenanigans. I don't know if that happened in your time, but it just keeps growing, where they're just making up ways to steal more of your time. And then, I'd get off watch, and I was a battle stations drill guy. So I was writing drills and anomalies and route the drill package, brief the captain, do all that. I was an assistant ship's diving officer. I was writing and grading exams. I was sitting dive boards. I was doing all those. And then the Cobb would pawn a lot of his work off on me because he was preparing me to be a Cobb. So I'm signing the plan of the day. I'm doing checkouts as the Cobb for duty chief and all this other stuff. I was the Simeo. I was president of every NJP. I was doing the command climate survey. It was never ending. What I wasn't doing was my job. Thank God I had a just hyper capable second class as an LPO, but it also, I had moments where I had to put that kid back together again with a glue stick because he was falling apart under the stress of all the things that he was doing that were my job. But I couldn't, I didn't have the bandwidth to do it. And it was like, I argued and I tried to get off the watch wheel so I could spend time training the guys. I tried to get off the watch wheel just so I could be a resource that was available to my LPO and help him out, because it wasn't fair that he had to do all those things. So
it's almost like we've loaded too much onto, because I always say that if you're a doer, you're not a leader, and I see that in the civilian world a lot, where people will get themselves so busy that they never see their team, right? Mm-hmm. And in this case, it wasn't that you wanted to be that busy; you were forced to be that busy,
right?
It's like to do your job is all these other things, and you're like, well, wait a second, I also have to run this department. And you've given me zero time to run the department.
I would say, practically, if you're doing it, if I'm getting my hands dirty, then I'm not actively leading. But it was very much a bandwidth issue because I was leading. I just wasn't doing it in my work center or my department. I would come by as much as I possibly could, but I was leading the ship. I was leading us in battle stations missile things, which are very important. It was our primary mission on a ballistic missile submarine. So it's we have to do those things. War day is important, I guess. You got to train and be proficient so that if we're called upon to do it, we can do it, and we know we can do it. But in the mind of a nuclear trained, an 1120 commanding officer, that's all that matters. Food, whatever, lunch will be there. They don't care about those things. They don't care that I have instructions that tell me that you're going to have a JAG man on your hands if I don't do my job well, because I'm managing, $500,000 of food. The LSs are managing just millions upon millions of dollars of inventory of parts and consumables and everything else.
It's incredible. Yeah. And the thing is, if you want to, people don't realize when you're locked in a metal tube and you're out there for months at a time, food is really important.
It's real important.
It's about the only thing good you have in life is your food, right? And if your food sucks, you're not going to have a happy crew. Right. I can tell you that,
Right.
And we always had, we just had amazing, we had amazing crew on the Tennessee, and we always had the best food, and I'll never forget that. And, But you're right. And I think one of the things you touched on, I think is really important. You said, and I think this is really, really key, we do a really good job, especially in the submarine force, at getting qualified on watch stations, right? You have to spend a lot of time. You got to prove your knowledge, and getting your dolphins is not an easy task, right? It's a long process. And people think, well, you're an officer, that was easy. No, it was not easy.
No, it's not. No,
they take you through
the life of a junior officer. Sweet Jesus. Top 3 things I wouldn't want to do on a submarine: be an egg hanger, be a nuclear electrician, and be a junior officer on their first tour. Good Lord. I don't have any,
especially a butter bar showing up as an ensign. That sucked. I can tell you that for sure. Yikes. But one of the things is they do a really good job qualifying you to do these really difficult things, right? Yeah. But yet we don't have a qualification process for leadership. Mm-hmm. You don't have a qual card for being qualified to be a leader.
Right. We don't even have a robust leadership development and education program, which I understand, like not having a PQS for it or a qualification process, even though I think you could accomplish that in a productive way. We don't even have we don't put time, effort, and resources into just caring enough to do robust leadership development and education. You see these little tiny efforts, which feels like they're trying to address the symptom of a problem where back in the day, they had nav lead probably when you were in. Yeah. Went to a couple of those courses and they're pretty good. But then as soon as NETSI, the Education and Training Command, had a budget cut, the first thing they cut was nav lead, which is insane. I would delete every other school there is except leadership. That would be the last thing to go. So then they went into the command delivered training, which was the most brain dead decision I've ever analyzed in my entire career in and out of the Navy, as far as oh yeah, you know what? The command that can barely do what they need to do and sleep at the same time, you got to do the leadership development stuff too. So the PO Indoc turned into a box check. Most commands didn't even do it. They just went into whatever the system was and checked it off. So then they're like, okay, well, there's recognition finally that this is a giant waste of time, money, and whatever. It's not even happening really. So they came up with it's NLEC ELD. It's a Naval Leadership and Ethics Center is doing an enlisted leadership development thing where they kind of compromised with the brick and mortar versus command delivered and stuff, where they want a bunch of people that are on shore duty to get certified as facilitators, and then we kind of pull from wherever those people are, when those people have bandwidth, organize a class, and then all the people come in and get that class. I've heard good and bad reviews, mostly good. The problem being they came up with it. They're like, oh, hey, this is a great idea. We're going to stand up all this infrastructure. And then once it's solid state, we're going to mandate it as a PMK thing you need to do before you promote. The problem is COVID happened. So right when they were starting to try to roll it out, COVID just ate all that progress. And then it never really spun back up. There was never really any sense of urgency once COVID kind of calmed down to spin that program back up. So it's still not really, it's just this thing I talk about occasionally. And it seems like a thing that they're just talking about occasionally on the active duty side of it. That it doesn't seem to be gaining momentum. And then I've actually heard, which is discouraging, the ones that are happening are kind of not great lately, which I haven't heard that from a lot of people. So I'm hoping that it's an anomaly. But yeah, they're not even doing education along the whole way. And that when I started the podcast, that was the recognition of I joined the Navy, got zero leadership development and education outside of happening upon strong mentors, which was blind luck, until I got to the Senior Enlisted Academy as a chief. And that was early. I was a 15-year chief, eligible for senior chief. And I squeaked in one of those classes that had an opening.
So 15 years in, and you're starting to get your first...
15 years in, which... Yeah. I mean, if I had bad behaviors, every single one of them was ingrained in me. Every one of them had been validated along the way through promotions and awards and advancement through positions and so by the time you get to the Senior Enlisted Academy, I mean, 50% of the people that I was there with were there to check a box that they perceive because it was going to become mandatory to make Master Chief. So they were there and I heard them say it out loud. Senior Chief's just I don't care. I'm just here to get the piece of paper so I can promote. And it's it was mind blowing to me. It should be a CPO academy because that was the level of what was happening there. And it blew my mind. It was incredible. And I'm not saying it didn't revolutionize my like leadership outlook, but I learned some stuff and I thought it was extremely productive. And it felt like the type of thing we should be putting chiefs through within like the first year or two of their wearing khakis. So, but we're not even doing that. Like we can't even get the throughput up on the Senior Enlisted Academy to make it mandatory to promote to Master Chief. Like there's not that many Master Chiefs in the Navy when you compare it to the scope of the like 250,000-ish people in the Navy. I mean, how many Master Chiefs are there? Like a couple thousand, maybe?
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, you can't even get those. And you're looking at eligibles. So there's more Senior Chiefs. So like multiply that by whatever. But we can't even get a throughput of like 5,000 to 10,000 people on one school. And so but I bet you that throughput exists on like some like technical school for A-gangers or some wire rate technical school. That's like, there's radiomen and sonarmen schools that are 6 months long. Like how can we do that? But we can't have, I was in residence for 3 months and did like 6 weeks or 3 weeks and did 6 weeks on Blackboard online.
Well, even if you're at one of these schools, that you could embed leadership as part of the program, right?
Exactly. Sure.
Especially as you are ranking up. And one of the things I like about the Navy is you start off, with you're a doer, right? And then as you evolve into a leadership role, and when you reach that chief petty officer, usually a first-class petty officer, you've got some good leadership responsibilities, and then you become a chief, and then really your doing goes down and your leading is supposed to take over. So you would think that as you progress in your Navy journey, as you're sent to schools, that they should be weaving the leadership into your whatever class, whatever schools you're going to, because now you're in the E5 range, or sorry, E6, E7 range. Here's the training that should go along with that, because now you're leading a group of 10 people likely. So but you could weave that into existing schools. My son, who's an E5, he spent 2 years in school before he showed up to his ship.
Right. I
2
believe
years.
It.
2 solid
2
years.
Yeah. Nukes are, it's like 4 years.
Yeah.
And it's okay. So like, you're telling me that leadership isn't important in the operation of a nuclear reactor? I beg to differ. Like how are we
as officers? And I don't know if it's the same, since I've left, but we had a technical rating. That was very important. And your technical rating determined what likely if you got command, essentially. You didn't have a leadership rating. You had a technical rating. It was based on how you did at nuke school, how you did prototype, how you did on the engineer's exam, and how you did serving, in your first JO tour. You would have a technical rating. And I always thought, like, why not a leadership rating? I mean, that's even more important than how
to be the commanding officer of a submarine.
You would think that leadership is number one, not like how many control rods in the reactor, right?
Yeah, like not that that's not really important. Also, like a lot of times when I talk to people, like I don't want to discount the importance of technical competency at all. Like it's really important. Right. The submarine is trying to kill you at all times with pressurized hydraulics, pressurized air, radioactive material, the seawater outside the people tank, fire if it decides to rear its ugly head. Like it's really important that you know how to fight that ship, but we're doing a really good job of making sure people are ready to fight that ship by all of those metrics we talked about earlier with the qualification submarines and then the qualification and proficiency and training that we get for watch stations. And
so weave some people skill stuff in there, weave some leadership stuff in there. So
I mean, and I'm not like I say this all the time, which makes me feel like people think I am, but like I'm not auditioning for the job, but there are plenty of people like me that like I talked to Dave Deary of the Enlisted Leadership Foundation. That was I just had that podcast come out today. I was like, when I talked to him, he's already kind of doing it. They have like leadership academies. They're a nonprofit with a bunch of like retired fleets and CMCs and all that. There's probably some officers in there too. I'm just not aware. Like I know Joanne Ortloff's involved. She's a retired fleet master chief. Blah, blah, blah. But they run leadership academies in the San Diego area, and commands can use travel funds to send somebody at cost orders TAD to these leadership academies when the schedule permits, and they'll do it for you. So I'm like, why Department of the Navy have we not cut this man a check yet? Just let him do it. Like it's not, you don't even need, I've been saying that for years about it went from just chief season involvement to leadership development and education across the board to like leadership period, why we're not leveraging veterans and retirees for those jobs. I'm beside myself. Like one of my cobs, he was my cob when I made chief on the Jimmy Carter. And he's the guy that pinned my Master Chief anchors on me, like with my wife. He's a national treasure. That guy, I mean, he would volunteer to do it. He doesn't need the money. Like, you know what I mean? Like there are people that, especially being in the capacity I am now, I would volunteer to do it. You don't got to pay. I mean, granted, like if it became a full-time job, it's a different conversation. But like, if I'm just showing up to facilitate a class twice a month, just to have that access to sailors, like I might bring a microphone and use some of it for my own purposes, but like I would do it just because I love doing it. And it's extremely rewarding and fulfilling, but it also feels like it's like my prime directive. I feel like I have a responsibility to do it still, even though I'm not in uniform anymore. So sign me up. Like I'd sign up on a volunteer sheet to come facilitate that course. That like if ELF expanded to like now they're in Norfolk and Washington and, you know, I don't know, like wherever, Groton, where we're doing it that way. Like sign me up. You don't got to pay me a dime. And I bet you would see, I mean, it might not be, you might not get enough volunteers to sustain that when you scale it up, but the resources are abundant and they're just not being leveraged outside of, because that's what they probably, some bean counter in wherever Bupers is in DC probably is looking at their spreadsheet and going, well, we couldn't do that because we don't have enough active duty sailors to man ships and shore command. So what active duty sailors are we going to send to go do this?
Yeah. Well, how about a couple of us veterans out here? That's
how many. Like you got, you, me, Jeff Bayless, Jason Thompson, Paul Kingsbury. Like I could go on. And that would all be my retired cob. And I mean, Rick West lives in my area. Like retired MCPONs, just that would happily, they show up to the Senior Enlisted Academy all the time and go into Leadership Hall and like just soak up. Like people think that they're there because the Senior Enlisted Academy asked them. They're there because they want to access sailors. They want to access chiefs and hang out with chiefs and feel like they're back in the game for a minute. And it's like, that's why you would get such a robust response, in my opinion, to that kind of a thing. So it blows my mind that they haven't just cut Dave Deary a check.
Well, that's it for today. Listen in Saturday for the second half of this interview. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.
Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all you do.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information and updates, please visit our website at www.deepleadershippodcast.com or johnsrennie.com. Until next time, take care.
Hey there, fabulous souls. I'm Stephanie Baklaan.
And I'm Eden Alpert.
And we're the hosts of the brand new podcast, Unapologetically Fab.
Get ready to join us on an amazing and real journey as we dive into life after 40 and own it.
We're all about changing the narrative, leaning into who you are, and living a life by your own design.
Join us as we embrace life unapologetically and redefine success.
This is Unapologetically Fab,
an Electric Cast production.
See you there.
Electricast.
Miles, are you ready to record our promo for Season 2 of the Wanna Bet podcast?
David, have you ever seen a grown man naked?
Miles, we're not here to quote lines from Airplane. We're here to tell people that Season 2 starts August 18th.
But I like Airplane.
I know you do, but Wanna Bet is a sports betting podcast. Each week we bet $1,000 on the NFL teams and games that we love.
Well, that sounds like fun.
It is fun. And last year you picked over 60% of your games correctly.
How'd you do?
We're not talking about that. We are telling people that they can find us every Friday. So no more movie quotes.
Roger.
Electricast.